I want to start today with a mental image that is honestly kind of mind-blowing. I want you to imagine you're an archaeologist.
Yep.
You've just cracked the seal on an ancient Egyptian tomb, something that's been shut tight for, what, over 3,000 years? The air is stale, it's pitch black, you're brushing away millennia of dust. And then, amidst all the golden pottery, you find a simple ceramic jar.
The classic treasure hunter moment, right?
Exactly. So you pry the lid off, and inside there's this sticky golden substance. And here's the kicker. Based on everything we know from our sources today, you could dip your finger into that jar.
A jar of honey harvested when the pyramids were still new.
And you could eat it, and not only would it not kill you, it would probably still taste pretty good.
It is the ultimate edible time capsule. Yeah. I mean, there is literally no other food on the planet, not rice, not salt, nothing, that can sit on a shelf for 3 millennia without turning into dust or, poison.
That is what we're unpacking today. We're doing a deep dive into honey. And I know, for most of us, honey is just that plastic bear in the pantry or something you squeeze into tea when your throat hurts.
Right.
But looking at these articles, it becomes so clear that honey is actually a biological and chemical marvel.
It really is. It was humanity's primary strategic sweetener. Long, long before we ever figured out how to refine sugarcane or beets. It was a cornerstone of civilization.
So that's our mission for this deep dive. We're going to explore honey as a survival tool. We'll break down the surprisingly complex chemistry that makes it basically immortal.
Mm-hmm.
And we're going to get into some weird territory, too. Specifically, the difference between flower honey and something the sources call secretion honey.
Which is a very polite scientific term for something that might ruin your appetite, but it's fascinating biology.
And we'll tackle the medical realities versus the myths. But let's start with that strategic aspect. Because today, sugar is cheap, it's everywhere, it's almost a nuisance. But the sources paint a very different picture of the ancient world.
Completely different. You have to strip away the modern grocery store from your mind. Before the industrialization of refined sugar, if you wanted calories dense, instant energy honey was pretty much the only game in town.
Right.
It wasn't just a topping, it was a currency, it was a preservative, it was medicine.
The notes mention rock paintings in Spain. The Arana Cave.
Right, the Arana Cave paintings. These date back to roughly 6,000 BC, and they show human figures climbing up these cliffs on, rickety ladders or maybe even vines, surrounded by swarms of bees, just to get to a wild hive.
Which really puts things in perspective. You don't risk falling to your death for a dessert.
No.
You do it because that resource is incredibly valuable.
Exactly. It was a calculated risk.
Yeah.
For at least 8,000 years, we've been risking life and limb for this stuff. And when you move forward to the major civilizations, its value just skyrockets.
Ancient Egypt seems to be the heavy hitter here. The sources say they used it for, well, everything.
Everything is barely an exaggeration. It was a staple offering to the gods, which tells you its economic worth. You don't offer garbage to the divine.
Sure.
But they also used its chemical properties, before they even understood the science.
Yeah.
They used it in mummification mixtures because they realized it stopped flesh from rotting.
That's wild.
They used it in cosmetics. They used it to treat open wounds.
It's strange to think of honey as a cosmetic. But I suppose if it preserves a mummy, maybe the logic was it preserves a living face, too.
That was likely the logic. It locks in moisture. And this wasn't just in Egypt. In Mesopotamia, we found clay tablets with recipes for medicines based on honey. In ancient Greece, Hippocrates, the father of medicine, was prescribing it for fevers and coughs.
And the athletes, right? I saw a reference to something called hydromel.
Yes, hydromel. It sounds fancy, but it's basically a mixture of honey and water. The Greek Olympians used it. You should think of it as the Bronze Age Gatorade.
The original sports drink.
It was. Instant energy. And the Romans took that a step further. They issued honey to soldiers as part of their standard rations.
Wow.
If you're marching 20 miles a day in armor, you need that caloric density. They also used it to sweeten wine and in savory sauces to balance flavors.
And culturally, it carries this massive weight. I mean, you just have to look at the religious texts.
Absolutely. The Quran has the Nal Surah, which speaks of honey as a healing for people. The Bible and the Torah describe the Promised Land as flowing with milk and honey.
We hear that phrase all the time, land of milk and honey, but what does it actually mean?
It's a symbol of pastoral abundance. In a dry, arid landscape, milk means you have healthy livestock.
Goats and sheep.
Right. And honey means you have flourishing vegetation and bees. It represents a complete self-sustaining ecosystem where you won't starve. It's the ultimate promise of survival.
Okay, so it's liquid money, it's survival, and it's been around forever. But I want to circle back to that opening image of the jar and the tomb. Because scientifically, that just shouldn't happen. If I leave a piece of fruit on the counter, it molds in a week. If I leave meat out, it rots. How does honey defy the laws of decomposition?
It really feels like magic, but it's actually just ruthless chemistry. The sources describe it as an anti-spoilage triad. There are three distinct things working together to keep it fresh for 3,000 years.
Okay, let's unpack the triad. What's the first defense?
The first and most important is low water activity.
Right.
Now, honey is a liquid, so it does contain water, usually about 17 to 18%.
Right.
But the sugar concentration is massive, about 80 to 82%.
So it's just completely oversaturated.
Correct. And this creates what we call a powerful osmotic effect.
Osmotic effect. Okay, for the non-chemists listening, let's break that down. What does that mean in practice?
Think of honey like a molecular sponge that is desperate for water. It wants to reach equilibrium. So if a bacteria or a fungus lands in the honey, the sugar in the honey is so hygroscopic, so water-attracting, that it literally sucks the water right out of the bacteria's cell.
Yeah. It pulls the water out of the bug.
Instantly.
Good.
The bacteria is sucked dry, dehydrates, and dies.
Yeah.
Sort of like how we use salt to preserve beef jerky. The bacteria just can't function because its internal water is stolen by the honey.
So the honey is basically a death trap for microbes.
It's a desert disguised as a liquid.
Yep.
So that's defense number one.
Okay.
Defense number two is acidity. Honey has a surprisingly low pH, usually between 3 and 4.5.
Which is pretty acidic. That's like, what, vinegar or orange juice territory?
Exactly. Most of the bacteria that cause food to spoil, like E. coli or Salmonella, they prefer a neutral environment. They just can't survive or reproduce in the acid bath that is honey.
So you have dehydration and you have acid. What's the third part of the triad? This is the one that sounded the most sci-fi to me.
This is the secret sauce added by the bees. It's what separates honey from just a jar of sugar syrup. When bees process nectar, they regurgitate it and add an enzyme called glucose oxidase.
Glucose oxidase, and what does that do?
This enzyme starts a chemical reaction with the glucose in the honey. When the conditions are right, it produces these low levels of hydrogen peroxide.
Wait, hydrogen peroxide, like the stuff in the brown bottle you put on a scraped knee?
The very same. It's a natural antiseptic. The bees are essentially manufacturing a disinfectant within the food itself.
Wow.
So to
Wow.
recap, any bacteria that lands in honey is first dehydrated by osmosis, then burned by acid, and finally bombarded with antiseptic hydrogen peroxide.
That is chemical warfare in a jar. No wonder it doesn't spoil.
It's an incredibly hostile environment for anything trying to live in it. And yet, for us, it's just food. And nutritionally, it's this complex cocktail. It's mostly fructose and glucose, but it also contains amino acids, trace vitamins, and minerals like potassium and calcium.
So I've got the history, we've got the chemistry. Now I want to get to the part that genuinely surprised me. I think most of us operate on the assumption that honey equals flowers. A bee lands on a flower, goes home, boom, honey. But the sources say that's not the only way.
No, and this is a huge misconception. We classify honey into two main categories based on where the sugar comes from. The first is what you just described, flower honey or nectar honey.
Acacia, lavender, orange blossom, that kind of thing.
Exactly. The bee visits the blossom, drinks the nectar, does its work. But the second category is, well, it's a bit more wild. It's called secretion honey. You might also see it labeled as honeydew honey or forest honey.
The word secretion is doing a lot of heavy lifting there. What are we talking about?
Okay, so in this scenario, the bees are not visiting flowers, they're visiting other insects.
Of insects.
Yes. There are certain insects, aphids are a common one, or a scale insect that lives on pine trees. These insects drill into the tree and drink the sap. But the sap has way more sugar than they need, so they digest what they need and then excrete the rest as this sticky, sugary liquid.
Okay, I'm going to stop you there. Are you telling me the bees are collecting insect poop?
Scientifically, we call it honeydew, which sounds much nicer, doesn't it? But fundamentally, yes, it is the sugary excretion of a sap-eating insect. The bees collect that liquid and process it just like nectar.
That is simultaneously horrifying and fascinating. So when I buy forest honey, I'm eating processed aphid secretions.
If it makes you feel better, think of it as processed tree sap that has just passed through an intermediary. And here's the thing. People love this stuff. Plain honey, which is massive in Turkey and Greece, is almost exclusively a secretion honey.
Right, because pine trees don't really have nectar flowers.
Exactly. It's from the insects living on the pine tree.
I have definitely eaten pine honey. I'm going to have to process this information emotionally. But does it taste different?
It does. Secretion honeys like oak or pine tend to be darker, less sweet, and have a more resinous malty flavor. They don't have that floral perfume. They also tend to be higher in minerals and antioxidants.
So it's kind of the stout beer of the honey world.
That's a great analogy. It's much more robust.
While we're on different types, the sources also highlight some specialty honeys. Manuka honey seems to be the celebrity of the honey world right now. It's so expensive.
Manuka is huge. It comes from New Zealand, from the Leptospermum scoparium bush. Its claim to fame is that it has extremely high antibacterial activity that goes beyond just the hydrogen peroxide. It contains a compound called methyl glyoxal, or MgO, that makes it incredibly potent against bacteria.
And then there's chestnut honey.
Chestnut is for the connoisseur. It's dark, almost bitter, very sharp. But the sources point out it has some of the highest phenolic content, so it's packed with antioxidants. It's definitely an acquired taste.
Now, we have to talk about the danger zone, because I saw this in the notes and thought it was an urban legend, but apparently mad honey is a real thing.
Oh, it is very real. In Turkish, it's called deli ball. It's usually made when bees collect nectar, primarily from rhododendron flowers.
Rhododendrons, those are just garden bushes with pretty flowers.
They are, but their nectar contains a potent neurotoxin called granotoxin. If the bees are feeding exclusively on rhododendrons, the honey ends up containing this toxin in high concentrations.
What happens to you if you eat it?
It attacks the nervous system. We're talking dizziness, nausea, blurred vision, and a sudden, dangerous drop in blood pressure. It can cause fainting or heart rhythm irregularities.
Has this ever been used tactically?
Funny you should ask. There is a famous historical account involving Pompey the Great, the Roman general. In 67 BC, his army was marching through the Black Sea region, and the local tribes placed hives filled with mad honey along the road.
A honey trap.
Literally. The Roman soldiers ate the honey, became delirious and incapacitated, and were easily slaughtered. It was one of the first recorded uses of biological warfare.
That is wild. A stark reminder that natural doesn't always mean safe.
Exactly. Nature has poisons too.
That leads us perfectly into the medical side of things. We talked about the ancients using honey for wounds, and we just talked about honey poisoning soldiers. What does modern science say? Is honey medicine, or is that just folklore?
It's a mix, but the data is surprisingly strong. But I have to start with a disclaimer. Honey is not a magic cure-all. It doesn't cure cancer, and you shouldn't rely on it for serious infections without a doctor.
Right, keep the expectations grounded.
But remember that antibacterial mechanism, the osmosis and the peroxide. That is clinically significant. Modern hospitals actually use sterile, medical-grade honey, usually Manuka, to treat burns and chronic wounds that won't heal.
So they are actually applying honey to wounds in 2024.
Yes, it keeps the wound clean and prevents infection. But, and this is key, do not go grab the plastic bear from your pantry and smear it on a burn. Pantry honey can have spores or dust. Medical honey is sterilized for this purpose.
Good distinction. What about the common cold? The hot tea with lemon and honey?
That holds up too. The mechanism here is that honey acts as a demulcent.
A demulcent, that's a great word.
It just means it forms a soothing film over a mucous membrane. So if you have a raw, scratchy throat, honey physically coats it, reducing the irritation that triggers the cough reflex. There are studies showing that for children, honey can be just as effective as some over-the-counter cough syrups.
You mentioned children there, but the sources have a massive flashing red warning light about this. Why can't babies have honey?
This is critical, and every parent needs to know this. You should never give honey to an infant under 1 year of age.
Because of the spores.
Yes. Honey can contain dormant spores of a bacteria called Clostridium botulinum.
Botulism? That sounds terrifying.
It is. Now, for you and me, our gut is developed and acidic. We eat the spores, they pass right through, we're fine. But a baby's gut ecosystem is still being built. It's not defensive yet.
So the spores can wake up.
Exactly. They colonize the baby's gut, reproduce, and cause infant botulism. It attacks the nervous system and can be fatal.
That is a massive public service announcement. No honey before the first birthday.
Correct. And the other reality check is for diabetics. Honey is often marketed as a healthy alternative to sugar.
Yeah.
But biologically, your body sees it as sugar. It breaks down into glucose and fructose. It spikes blood glucose.
So it's better than refined sugar, but it's not a free pass.
Precisely.
All right, let's pivot to something tastier. Culinary uses. We know it goes in tea. But the sources highlight some really interesting ways to use honey that go beyond breakfast.
Honey is incredibly versatile because it bridges that gap between sweet and savory. In the savory world, it's a balancer. Think about a honey mustard glaze.
Hmm.
The sweetness cuts through the acidity of the mustard. Or in marinades with soy sauce and ginger, the honey helps caramelize the meat and gives you that sticky glaze.
I do love a good honey glaze on salmon. It gets that nice char.
And one of my absolute favorites mentioned in the text is pairing it with cheese.
Cheese and honey.
It sounds odd if you haven't tried it, but if you have a really funky, salty cheese, like a Roquefort or a sharp pecorino drizzling honey over it, creates this explosion of flavor. The sugar balances the intense salt and the barnyard funk.
That sounds incredible. It's very sophisticated.
It is. And on the sweet side, obviously there's baklava, layers of pastry and nuts soaked in honey syrup.
Baklava is dangerous. You can't eat just one piece.
Or even simpler, the very ancient snack of Greek yogurt with honey and walnuts. That combination has been eaten for thousands of years. It's protein, healthy fats, and energy.
And there's one more beverage mentioned, mead.
Ah, the ancestor of all alcoholic beverages. Mead is simply honey fermented with water. Before we had vineyards for wine or fields of grain for beer, hunter-gatherers were likely fermenting wild honey they found in trees.
So the first time humans got buzzed, it was probably thanks to bees.
Most likely. And it's actually making a bit of a comeback now in craft brewing circles.
It's amazing how we're circling back to these ancient things.
It really is a full circle moment.
So let's recap. Honey isn't just a condiment. It's a survival food that sustained humanity. It's a chemical weapon against bacteria that uses osmosis, acid, and hydrogen peroxide to stay edible for millennia.
And it comes in varieties ranging from lovely orange blossoms to, well, insect secretions on pine trees. And don't forget the toxic rhododendrons that can knock out a Roman legion.
All right. It's a wild world inside that hive. You know, reading through all this, I had a thought. We talk so much today about processed food being the enemy.
That's the consensus, yeah. Processed is a dirty word.
We want everything raw, everything natural. We think of processed food as this modern, artificial, chemical-laden junk. But if you really think about it, honey is processed food.
That's a fascinating way to look at it.
It's nectar that has been collected, regurgitated, dehydrated, and enzymatically altered by bees inside a factory, the hive.
It is heavily processed. The bees are manufacturing it.
It's the original processed food. But unlike our modern preservatives, this processing creates something that defies time and decay naturally. It makes me wonder, if a jar from a pharaoh's tomb is still edible after 3,000 years, what does that say about the perfection of nature's preservation technology compared to all the artificial stuff we pump into our food today?
That is a profound question. We spend billions trying to make food last a few weeks on a shelf. Nature figured out how to make it last forever, thousands of years ago. Its chemistry set is still far superior to anything we've cooked up in a lab.
Something to chew on next time you're in the grocery store.
And speaking of that, next time you grab a jar, turn it around. Check the label. See if it's flower honey or pine honey.
Right.
And just think about the thousands of trips those bees made to fill that one jar.
Respect the bee. Thanks for listening to this deep dive. We'll catch you on the next one.